Welcome, everybody. We are back with the Armchair Racers podcast. It's episode 6 already. We took a week off for one of the holidays, I suppose. But we're back into the new year, 2021. We have a special guest with us this week, doing the broadcast in a little bit different format than we have in the past. But I'm your host, Kenny Kibbe, along with my co-host, Austin Belke, and we have our guest already here with us. J.R. Shepard is our guest this week. How are you guys doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, doing real good.
So, well, I guess first, just a small question. How do you guys holidays go? Christmas and New Year.
Mine was terrible. Um, my parents got sick with the COVID, so we stayed away from them, and then I caught something. So it was just a bad end to a bad year for me. But I'm looking forward to the new year.
How do yours go, Austin?
Mine went pretty all right, I guess. Christmas was okay. New Year's just kind of same holiday, sit around just another day. And, New Year though, so hopefully this one doesn't suck as bad as 2020.
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of screaming that. Well, hey, the podcast is off to a good start in 2021. Um, so, to get going with our guest, JR, first question, I guess, is let's go way back to the beginning of, you know, getting into the real racing, because we know you have a decent amount of real racing experience. Um, I mean, even as far as growing up, were you guys a racing household, or did that kind of come up later on?
Well, growing up, my dad was he was a big NASCAR fan. So back in the early '80s is when he kind of caught on to watching, and he NASCAR wasn't huge on TV back then. At least in the 70s, you'd only see pieces of it. So it was like early '80s when he really caught on and started going to races like at Talladega and Atlanta. And he kind of caught the fever a little bit with that. So as I was born in '86, he would always have me around when he was watching the races and stuff. So I'd kind of pick up little things. And of course, I thought it was stupid at first because I was watching these guys on TV and you'd see the lines on the track. And I was like, well, these guys can't stay inside the lines. They can't drive. So I didn't understand anything about it at first, but he kept he kept having me around him when he would watch them on TV. And my mom, she worked at the local car dealership, local Ford dealership for 30 something years. So her connections with Ford Credit and Ford Motor Company, they would have different events down there throughout the years. And I can remember having Bill Elliott's car, show car, not one he'd be racing, but it could be a past car that he had raced, and they'd bring it down there and have a big event and everything. And I remember that being down there 3 or 4 times growing up. So um, that's how I kind of got introduced to it. And about the time that I was probably about 6 years old is when my dad started racing, and he started racing dwarf cars on dirt, which is similar to a legend car. And he he wasn't very good at it just because he didn't know how to do setups and things like that. And he got a few people to help him, and he had some good runs, but eventually got in a bad accident and kind of ended everything as far as his racing went. So from there to the time I started racing was probably about 10 or 11 year time span there. So yeah, we weren't like a big racing family, but we were fans for sure.
Why did it take so long? I mean, what was the time difference, I guess, or why did it take that 10 or 11 years?
Yeah, my dad kind of got burned out with it. He's the kind of person now, he enjoys watching races, and he enjoys going to them in person occasionally. But as far as having to mess with it himself with a car or something, he's just not as interested in that anymore. So once he got out of it, he kind of got other hobbies, motorcycles, things like that that he enjoyed doing. And you know, probably from the time I was 9 till about 17, I was just constantly on them that, hey, I want to race, I want to race, I want to do this. And I wasn't getting anywhere. So it was a little depressing, but eventually I found a car that was at a reasonable price that wasn't too far away. And at that time, I was working summer jobs while I was going to high school, so I had money saved up, and I told them, "Hey, you know, I'll help pay for this if you guys will help me do the rest." And um, I finally talked them into it, and that's how I got my first race car. That's when we went and picked up a Legend car down in Georgia and brought it back home.
Now you're in Tennessee now. Have you always been in Tennessee? Is that always been where home base is?
Yeah, we've always been in Tennessee and Dunlap area, and I live a couple hours away from that now, but home's always been in Dunlap.
So were you guys ever like Darrell Waltrip fans because of the Tennessee connection at all?
Yeah, you know, it was one of those things where like we were excited he was from Tennessee type thing. My dad was never a huge fan of him, just from when he came into the sport, but it wasn't that we didn't like him or anything like that. Just my dad was always a Bill Elliott fan and Richard Petty fan, and my mom was a Davy Allison fan, so it was those are always the guys that we kind of pulled for.
I assume two of the three of those is basically that Ford connection you say you guys had.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you didn't have like a did you have a standout favorite you liked above the others?
Just in my household, it was always Bill Elliott, and then my mom liked Davy Allison, and it was always those two that we were always watching and keeping an eye on. And then as I got a little bit older, I became a huge Mark Martin fan.
So what year would it have been then like the first year you're watching like NASCAR and you actually like you're starting to understand it now. Like so I'm trying to put a connection to like what era of NASCAR that would have been.
Oh, you're talking like 1990, 1991. I'd have been around 5 years old, so that's really when I started watching it and comprehending what was going on.
Gotcha. Okay. So now you go and you get your first uh race car. Was there any what was this car like? Did it have a lot of quirks to it? Was it a good race car for what you guys got it for? Did you was there I mean, I assume there was a lot of work that went into it.
Yeah, so I always spend a lot of time doing research, and you know, we were always wary about buying a car because you never know what's been done with it or whatever. And I came across this guy that we didn't know it at the time, but he was well off. He had his own businesses, so he had good money. And when we went to look at the car, you could tell that the car had the best of everything in it. And he was just at a point where he was not having the time to deal with it and go racing every week, so he was wanting to get rid of it. Not because of anything being wrong with the car. So when we saw it, we knew that this, if we were going to get a car, it needed to be this one. It had everything on it. It's in great condition. The engine was in good shape. So when we saw it, we kind of snatched it up, and not only did we get the car, it came with a lot of spare parts, which we had nothing at that point. So it was another selling point for us, and yeah, it was just one of those things that you know, you don't find deals like that very often. You know, these cars are pretty expensive, especially if you buy them straight from 600 Racing. So we found it at a price that was about half price of what you would pay for a brand new car, and this car was in a much better shape than a new one.
So it was a legend car, and what colors were it? What was the number you raced primarily?
Well, the cool thing about it, the guy was out of Georgia, and you know, I'm from Dunlap, which is close to the Chattanooga area, and Jody Ridley is a Georgia native that raced in NASCAR, and he's not too far outside of the Chattanooga area, his hometown. And this guy was a huge Jody Ridley fan. So the car was painted up like a lot of Jody Ridley's super late models and stuff were that he would run. And it had number 98, which is also Jody Ridley's number. And we thought that that was an extremely cool story. And that was the first question that the guy selling us the car asked us. Said, "Hey, what number are you gonna put on it?" And after I knew the whole connection with Jody Ridley, I told him I thought, well, number 98 looks good to me, so I'll just stick with that. And that's how I came to drive the number 98 car.
Yeah, that is a pretty cool story. Um, so like when you guys bought that car, did you was there a quick turnaround to your first race, or did you guys have the car for quite a bit of time before you decided to enter it into something?
No, it was within 2 weeks actually. So we had been going to a lot of legend car races in the area, and we even had um, people that we knew in the next town over that were racing legend cars. So we'd been communicating with them back and forth quite a bit. And we finally told them, hey, we bought a car. We'd like to go to the track that Saturday morning with you guys and have you guys help us out a little bit. And they were fine with that. So my first race was in Carthage, Tennessee, at Riverview Speedway, and it's a it's a quarter-mile Bristol track is what it is. It's not as high banked as Bristol, but it looks like it. It's about 26 degrees of banking, and you're going around there in about 10-second laps in these little cars. So it's it's quite an experience, something new to get used to. But that's the first place that I went, and of course we had them adjust on the car. We haven't done anything with it, and they adjusted the air pressures and made some changes to the car because they wanted to tighten it up for me. And I went out there and tried to set the world on fire and knocked down the wall instead off of turn 4. So yeah, my first experience on the racetrack ended in a wreck, unfortunately.
So how old would you have been at this first start?
I was 17, so I was actually one of the old guys starting out. Guys these days they start racing. 11 and 12 is an old age. So starting at 17, I was a little bit behind, but there were still guys older than me, so I didn't feel too old.
So how long did it take to fix this damage that you sustained to your car?
So there's a lot of cool stories, but on this one, I smacked the wall off of turn 4, and it basically broke the upper frame lollipop, the part that the upper control arm actually mounts to the frame. It busted it clean off the frame. So that would be a day done type issue, but the guys that were helping us out, he was a really good welder, and the racetrack had a repair shop. So we wheeled it over there, and he was actually able to weld this thing back together so I could race it that night. And it was not a great looking weld at all. It was pretty bad because it was a place that was hard to get into. But he told me it should hold for the night, and it did. And we actually raced it that way for like a whole nother year before we replaced that lollipop. So it was a it was a lot better weld than what it looked.
I'm actually looking online at some pictures right now of Riverview Speedway. Looks like is it abandoned now but still standing?
It is abandoned. I can't tell you the last time that cars actually ran there. At one time, it was a NASCAR sanctioned track for weekly racing series, and I mean it was a super nice track. I loved racing there. It was really tough when you go there because it's hard to explain to someone that's not been in a race car, but when you went into these corners, your head and your legs, everything that was not strapped down went straight and you're turning the car left. So as you're going through the corner, your head's pointing right, but you want to be pointing left so you can see the corner. And it's a crazy experience because you have to build up those muscles in your neck and your arms and everything to keep yourself balanced in that car. Even though you're strapped into that seat, your body's trying to go somewhere else. And it's you don't get many racetracks that are like that. And that thing was such had such speed to it and such high banking that it did that. So um, yeah, it was a really cool track. I've not raced anywhere that would produce those kind of effects on you.
It looks like too. I can see the why it got the name Riverview Raceway. It looks like beyond turn 1 and 2, there was a big old river back there.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, it's a nice area though. It's really beautiful out there, and it just kind of set out in a field close to the river. And yeah, it was an enjoyable place to go. That's where I spent my first season racing. Um, and then they kind of dropped our division, so we had to move on elsewhere. And I think the next track I raced at was Highland Rim Raceway. That's up in Greenbrier, Tennessee. And I ran my second season there, and we also ran a race at the Nashville Fairgrounds that season.
Yeah, I'll have to. I found a video. I have to post on a link with it when this goes to YouTube. Um, it was a drone video of Riverview Speedway from February 2020, so you get a good view of what the track looks like now. Definitely looks. I mean, even now it looks like it wouldn't. The facilities probably are in disrepair, but the track itself looks like it's relatively nice still.
Yeah, it's a shame that they don't race there, but um, I can tell you a story in a minute on why why a lot of people didn't enjoy racing there. But it was a high speed track. It was extremely smooth, but it was one of those places that if somebody had a problem in front of you, there wasn't anywhere that you were going to go to avoid it. Just with the centrifugal force and the G forces that you're turning, you're not going to get your car to react to try to miss something. So I think a lot of people had tore up a lot of stuff there, and that's a risk you take when you race. But when it's at a place like this, it's guaranteed that if somebody wrecks in front of you, you're going to get caught in it. You really don't have a way to avoid it.
Yeah, I mean to an extent, yeah, it's that stinks that that track has that condition, but I mean in my thinking, like if you're signed up to race, I mean you're signing up for the danger that goes with it.
Well, but I mean, you can go, I don't know how many miles away to a different track where these dangers aren't as extreme or likely to happen.
Right, so I mean that could probably be why business would be lost at certain places if there's another track that's way different just down the road or something.
Yeah, and this track, it's only about 30 minutes, 40 maybe 45 minutes outside of Nashville. So you had the Nashville Fairgrounds just up the road, and about another 45 minutes up the road from that was Highland Rim, which is an extremely popular track close to the Kentucky border. So it those tracks were kind of getting all of the attention. That's where people were wanting to go watch races, and kind of where the money was too. So yeah, just unfortunately it didn't work out.
So it looks like is Highland Rim still active?
I believe Highland Rim is active. At one time, I know Bobby Hamilton Jr. had some ownership in that track, and he was there one night when I raced. But it's a very cool track, very tricky. It's very old, so it's kind of got like a Darlington type surface to it, or a Rockingham type surface, very gritty. And it's one of those tracks that the banking at the very bottom is pretty flat. If you run about two grooves up, you can get into some banking, probably about 10 or 12 degrees worth. So you kind of have multiple grooves that you can run there, and it made the racing a lot of fun. So you could drive it different ways and still get a good result.
So you go to some of these different tracks. You started at 17, like you said. How long did it take you to start being the J.R. Shepherd that like Kenny and I know, where you just go out and you are the person to beat?
It was during my second year of racing is probably where I learned the most. The first year, you're just trying to get used to everything and take everything in that you're feeling and how to work on the car and things like that. The second year, we went to Highland Rim, and these were extremely fast guys. We ran with fast guys at Riverview Speedway, but at Highland Rim, you had guys that were even faster, and there were a lot more of them. So that's where I started racing in the bigger packs. And the first couple of weeks we went to Highland Rim, we were terrible. The car would not turn. We didn't know what we were doing, and I could not get the car to turn at all. And I almost went a lap down in one of the races. The race finished just before they caught me, so we pulled back into the garage area, and I get out of the car, and I'm upset, but I'm not saying anything. And my dad just looks at me, and my dad goes, "Please tell me we're not that slow." And I was like, "No, we're not that slow." He goes, "But the car won't turn." And he's like, "Oh, good," because he thought it was me, um, just not being able to drive the car. And we talked to some people. We tried to figure out the basics, and with the legend cars, and it's the same with any race car, you have to get the basic setup pieces in place before you can ever do anything crazy that's going to get you some speed. So we had all of our basic setup elements out of place: the caster, the camber, the wheelbase, our toe, all these little things just added up and made the car do the opposite of what we were wanting to do. So the next couple of weeks after that, we started working on this thing and went back to the track. And I think I finished. It was probably like sixth place. I think is where I finished, and we were running in fields of like 25 cars. And I was super excited because I finished sixth, but I could see the leaders. I was on the same straightaway as these guys. I wasn't far off from them. And when I got out of the car, I was super excited to have something that fast. And once we understood the basics and where we needed the car to be, we just slowly worked on it each week and got a little bit better. And um, the following year after that's where we really started to show our speed.
So what year would that have been then? The next year where you start to get pretty fast.
So the year that I got fastest was the 2016 season. 2015, that's where we started out bad and then worked our way forward. Um, and I did have a second place run at Highland Rim one night, and my dad kind of went crazy about it because it's hard to explain. We're going to the racetrack in an open trailer that you would normally put like a lawnmower on, and we'd have a huge toolbox that would be in the back of the truck, and we'd have all of our spare tires and equipment in the back of the truck here. And that's how we went to the track. And we would pull in at Highland Rim, and there would be guys that would come in NASCAR haulers, and I'm not exaggerating. They would have a full-blown NASCAR hauler and trailer, and they'd have like six of these cars in that thing, and they'd pull it down on the ramp and lower it down. And you know we felt like we were extremely out of place even trying to compete with guys that were spending this kind of money, until we were able to compete with them and beat them on a regular basis. So that it kind of became a pride thing after a while. But at first it's a big beatdown when you see the kind of money that people put into this. um, but once you're starting to catch on and figure out what to do, and you're able to beat these guys, it becomes kind of a pride thing, and you don't want to stop after that.
So you said in you were at your best in like 2016, but doing just the math, you were about
No,
17.
sorry,
Started.
sorry, 2006.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
That that clears a lot of the math up.
I'm not so good at math in the morning, guys. I apologize.
You're good. It's early.
Okay, so that makes sense then. So yeah, and I totally agree with that. Where you it can be really tough when you're getting into this thing when you know that there's guys that are technologically so far ahead of you because of the resources they have, but uh, makes it that much sweeter when you're actually able to beat them.
Yeah, and these that's the one thing that I liked about the legend cars. There's not tons of adjustments that you can do. You have to have the car close, like I said, on the basic stuff. But a lot of the rest of it's your driving style and how you're actually driving the car. So, guys could go out and try to outspend you money wise, and they might find some speed doing that. But at the end of the day, if you've got a good driver, you can take any of these cars and run up front with it. So that was one of the things that kept me attracted to this series.
So was Highland Rim like a place where you ran for a track championship then? Were you there like every single week?
Um, we didn't run every week. We would miss races from time to time, but we ran, probably all but 4 or 5 of the races that year. And I'm thinking we probably finished somewhere around like 12th in points, something like that.
So did you ever have to go out and get sponsors for your car, or was this mostly just you spent the money on the car and I assume all the winnings you got from racing that were put back into your setup?
I tried to get sponsors. Like I said, I'm the type of person that kind of does a lot of research, and I kind of did the Carl Edwards type thing. And, I learned what businesses were looking for, and I actually put these sponsorship packages together and had multiple levels of sponsorship that you could offer. It could be, $500 a year, $1,500 a year, whatever, and had like 3 or 4 different levels. And I put these packages together and I sent them out to several of the businesses in my hometown that I felt would be willing to put some money out there. And I didn't get any responses back except for from one place that said the type of business they were in, they were not allowed to sponsor um, sporting activities. But again, I'm in high school at this time, and I'd go into the gym at the high school or onto the baseball and football fields at the high school, and I'd see these same companies that told me they couldn't sponsor me with their name all over the fields. So it was kind of disheartening because I'm like, I'm trying to do something here, guys, and you know, uh, try to put this little town on the map a little bit, and just wasn't getting any help. So the only sponsor that I ever put on the car was Forest Cape Motor Company, where my mom worked. The owner was a dirt super late model driver on the weekends, so he actually had a race shop on the same grounds as the dealership, and he would actually let me use his setup equipment to work on our race car. And occasionally I'd go to him when I felt like I needed a new set of tires to be fast, and he would fork the bill over for that. So I did put his name on the car, and that ended up being the only sponsor that I ever had.
How often would you need a new set of tires?
Realistically, in these cars, you need about a new set every 2 races. We didn't do that, so the thing with the tires is that every time you get a heat cycle in them, they get harder, so you lose grip. And these cars are all about grip. So what we uh, what we learned is that we couldn't buy tires every 2 races, so we would get a new set of tires, and I would not put them on the car until it was race time. I would go out and practice on an old set of tires and get the car set up using that old set of tires, and I'd be sliding all over the track, and everybody would be like, "Oh, he's slow today." But when I put that race set on and went out and qualified and raced on it, we were fast. So um, I learned to judge how the car was handling and what I needed in the car on those old set of tires. And we saved the good stuff for the race.
Do you think that helped or hurt you more because you're sort of setting up the car for old tires so that it helps you in the long run, but on the short run, I assume it's like a whole new world out there for you. So did that ever hurt you, you think, or helped?
It was an adjustment that you had to get used to. You had to be able to say, well, the car's doing this now. It's going to do this when I put the new tires on, type of thing. And it probably hurt us a little bit at first, but in the long run, it allowed us to understand better how to make adjustments on the car. So I think it was a good thing overall.
So when you were at your like peak of this, how much like time was the car taking? How much like time would you put into working on it like during the week to prepare for the next race, typically?
Yeah. So this is the funny thing. Everybody's got a different philosophy to it. One of the guys that I battled with up front each and every week during 2006, he would literally load his car up into the trailer on Saturday night when he left the track and not unload it until the next Saturday. And there'd be other guys that would completely take their car apart and change all the suspension parts on them, put it back together. And I was kind of in between that, so I was always my dad had always kind of taught me that you need to pay attention to the car itself because things can break, things can crack, and you don't know it. So every week I'd get the car back home, and throughout the whole week I would take things apart. I would inspect them. I'd go through the frame and see if I could see any cracks or damage that may have occurred, and just go through the car completely. And then you'd put it back together, put it back down on the ground, and you go through all of your basic setup things, make sure nothing had moved where you had taken it apart. You're just looking for damage, for play, and ball joints, different things that could have a negative performance aspect the next time you go to the track. So I would go through that each and every week, and it paid off multiple times. There was one time I found a cracked A arm that there was no sign of it, no symptom of it at all on the track. But if it had stayed on there, it would have broke probably going into one of the corners when it got loaded, and it would have destroyed the car. So it's it's one of those things that you just had to do, and some guys didn't believe in doing it, but I felt like it needed to be done.
So when did you get out of doing the this type of racing? Did you ever try to like graduate to the next level, maybe above this, or go to super late models? Did you think you could be a NASCAR Cup driver?
It was always my goal to try to at least get to where I could run a couple of ARCA races. That was always my goal, was to hopefully get there one day to where I could run at least a handful of those and say I did it. Um, we went through a season, I guess it was in 2009, where we'd gotten in a bad wreck, and it was at Riverview Speedway. Um, Damaged the car extremely bad, so it pushed the front, yeah, the steering box, the whole frame around that area up and backwards. So we pretty much had to cut the front clip and redo everything up there to get it back to where it needed to be. The thing that we didn't know at the time was that the engine had gotten some damage during that. So we came back out, won our next race. The second race back, we had just taken the lead. A caution came out, and under the caution, the engine expired, decided to lock up. So that pretty much put me out of racing, because the engines in these cars are pretty expensive for what they are. And at that point, you have to make a decision: do you want to keep trying to do this, or do you want to move up? So I'd kind of made the decision that, hey, I want to try to move up to late models. And we had been talking to some different car owners. One of them I ended up driving a car for. The last couple of times I drove a legend car were his cars, and he had went and bought a late model the next year, and I thought we were going to have a chance to be able to come out and drive it, but he ended up putting somebody else in the car, so that kind of dashed my hopes for a little while. And I thought, I'll just we'll keep saving and we'll try to get our own car. And this was at this point I'm in college. Money's pretty tight, and that's around the time the economy, started dropping off. So all of my resources kind of went away, and everything just kind of washed up there.
So you never really had then like a defined like, okay, this is my last race. I'm gonna go out on this one. It was more of you just, you were hoping for the next one, and the next one kind of just didn't come.
Yeah, that's the that's the humbling thing about auto racing is you never know when your last win is, you never know when your last race is. So, um, I had plans, and they just never panned out.
Did you ever get to drive anything above a legend car?
I did not. No. It it was funny. I'd have people come up to me that would see things I do in practice or during the race. Um, Drivers and car owners that were doing super late models, and they'd be like, "Man, you can flat out drive one of these things," and they give you all kinds of compliments, and there'd be different cars that would dominate at a track, and we'd be able to go out and beat them occasionally, and everybody'd come down from the higher ranks and be like, "Yeah, we're glad somebody took him out," and I really thought that we were going to be able to work our way into one of those seats when things opened up, and it just never happened. And basically, they understood that we didn't have a whole lot of money to offer them, and the guys that they ended up putting in the cars were guys that could bring sponsorship or some type of financial support to that car. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's about, and I understand it. But as a driver, it's frustrating when you know that guys who have never beat you before are getting opportunities like that.
Yeah, definitely. And you see that through all ranks of motorsport, even up into the higher ranks of NASCAR. You'll see a guy who's been killing it in the truck series or something, and he's having a hard time finding a ride for next year. But then there's this guy who's barely able to squeak into the top 10 once in a while, and he's got a new contract with somebody for next year. It's frustrating, not just from a driving standpoint, but from a fan standpoint too. When you're rooting for people like that who can't seem to find rides.
Yeah, it definitely is. And there's one guy that I raced with, and he'd probably get upset if I talked about it, but he's a guy who ran in legend cars for several seasons, and he was a couple of years younger than me. Him and his dad, they were extremely good people, and they worked hard. They put the money in the car, and the kid could definitely drive it. That was for sure. But he never beat me in a race. He was always close to me, but he never beat me in a race. And the guy that I thought I was going to be able to get at least a few rides in a late model, he ended up giving that ride to that kid. Uh, Not because of money in this case, but because he was a couple of years younger than me. And I'd kind of been written off at that point. I was around 20 years old, and they're like, "Well, you're too old." So they put him in the car, and he ran like a season with it. And he was a big iRacer too at that time. So he got to race with Dale Jr. and stuff online. And Dale Jr. had enough respect for him online that this guy ended up actually racing for Junior Motorsports and super late models up at Motor Mile Speedway one season. So um, I don't think it worked out for him. He's not racing anymore. The last time I had talked to him, but it just having an opportunity like that to be able to drive for a team like Junior Motorsports is extremely cool. And one of those, again, one of those frustrating things that sometimes things just don't work out. They never align for you, and I just never could get them to align.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you could constantly be playing the what if game, you know, going all the way back probably to what if that one big Legends wreck never happened.
Yeah, exactly. It's racing's a humbling sport. It unfortunately it's one of those things that once you do it, it gets in your blood, and you just can't you can never shake it off. It's always there, even if you try not to go around racing or watch it on TV or anything like that. It's still there, and it's hard to get rid of. But yeah, there's highs and there's lows, and a lot of times there's a lot more lows than there are highs.
Well, I feel like the sports like auto racing that you can't have something that has the highest of highs without having also the lowest of lows in the same sport because you understand how tough it is and how terrible it can be sometimes. And I think that's what makes auto racing so great is um, perseverance when you know how tough it is makes it more meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the if you don't care, I'll tell a story real quick.
Oh, sure.
Before before we actually went and got my car, this was a few years before we went and bought the Legend car. We were going to different tracks, watching Legend car races, and I'm trying to talk my parents into it, like, hey, this is something I can do, and I want to go and try to do this. And we went to 411 Motor Speedway in Knoxville, and we were watching the races up there. And it was time for the Legend cars, and they had a good field. There was like 25 cars or something in it. Toward the end of the race, everybody's kind of spread out, but there's two cars that are racing each other, and they kind of get together on the back stretch or coming onto the back stretch. And 411 looks just like Richmond Raceway does. It's got that dog leg, except for the dog leg's not on the front stretch; it's on the back stretch. So these guys get into each other coming onto that dog leg, and the one car goes barrel rolling down the back stretch. And after this car comes to a stop, my mom looked at me and my dad and says, "Nope, we're not doing that." And I was like, "Oh no, this is like the worst thing I could have done." And, I took them here to this race and they saw a wreck and now they don't want to do anything. So that dashed me for a couple of years. You go back to the end of my career, and the guy that let me drive his Legend cars at the end because he was trying to sell them and wanted somebody to put a good run in to show that the cars were in good shape. The very last car that I drove was that car that barrel rolled that night, and I didn't know it until I showed up at the track to drive the car, and he was telling me the history of it. So, um, in a very ironic way, the car that almost kept me from getting in a race car at all ended up being the last one I drove.
That is funny. How did you end up running in that last race?
Now we finished second. Had speed, just the car wasn't. I had no hand in the setup whatsoever, and we were trying to check things during the day and get it a little bit closer to where I felt like it needed to be. And the difference is, Legend cars have different style of cars. So you have the sedans and you have the coupes, and they're both balanced very differently. And I had driven a sedan my whole career, so I knew what that type of a car needed setup wise, and this thing was a coupe, so it was a little more twitchy. Adjustments you made kind of reacted a little harsher than what they would in the sedan car. So we didn't make the adjustments that we needed for the race. Actually qualified. I think I qualified on the pole that night and ended up finishing second in the race.
Now, which race track would this have been at?
That would have been at Newport Speedway, which used to be a NASCAR track for the Cup Series in the mid '60s, early mid '60s.
You spoke about, telling your parents that this is something you could do is drive these legend cars. How did you know you could do it or that you'd be competitive? What I guess was the drive to make you do this or thought, made you think you could handle them and do well?
Uh, More of just a passion, I guess. Being around racing a lot growing up and watching it on TV, I wouldn't just watch races. I'd study them. I'd see what guys were doing that worked. I'd watch what wasn't working, and I felt like I knew enough that I could figure it out once I had some seat time. And you know, I I started driving at an extremely early age. So another thing that I hadn't talked about is as a kid, we would go mud riding out into the woods. On the weekends, and we had trails and stuff that you could go on back then and be safe about doing it. And we'd be in these Ford F-150s that had 34-inch tires on them out in the out in the woods, and that's where I learned to drive. I'd be 6 years old, and my dad would put me in his lap, and he'd be doing most of the driving, but he would be showing me how to steer the truck, how to correct the truck. So as he's going sideways, even though we're only doing 15 or 20 mile an hour, he's showing me as the truck's going sideways, you have to do this. You have to be feeling for this so you know not to overcorrect. And he'd show me all these different things, and I just felt like that I had a natural feel for it. And it's hard to explain, but I just felt like it was something that I could do.
So if we go to, um, I'd like to know where, or like what was it like getting your first win? How did that race go? Where was that race at? And and well, there was one other question I was thinking of, but maybe I'll get to it later because I lost my train of thought. But yeah, like your first win in those Legends cars, like what was that race like?
Yeah, so my first win, there's probably two stories with that. But the first win was at Riverview Speedway. It was during my first season, and I was actually running third in the race, and the two leaders got to racing each other pretty hard, and it came down to the last lap. Going down the backstretch, the second place guy kind of darted out and made a late move on the leader going into turn three and kind of dove in there. The leader didn't see him, cut down on him. It spun the leader out. So I actually crossed the finish line in second place as we're on the cool down lap. Coming back around, they're telling me to stop, and I couldn't figure out why. Um, so I stop on the front stretch, and they walk over and hand me the checkered flag and tell me I've won the race. And what had happened is a couple of weeks before that, the track had had a lot of issues where guys were dive bombing each other on the last lap to try to win the race. And the track had made a decision that that was one of those type of dive bomb moves to take the leader out so the second place guy could win. So they took the win away from that guy and gave it to me. And I was excited to take the win, but to me, I hadn't won the race. So my real first win didn't happen until the 2006 season when we were racing at 411 Motor Speedway, and that was probably a more exciting race than anything there. That was one where I had qualified on the pole that night, but the second place guy got the jump on the start, which made me pretty mad that the track had let him do that. But he got off to the lead, and I think at one point I had actually fallen back to third place in that race. And the two guys in front got to racing hard and kind of bumping each other, and I found a hole while they were doing it and was able to scoot by. and after that, I was able to run off and get the win. So that was the rewarding win, even though it was my second one. That felt like the first one.
How long typically were these feature races?
So for legend cars, you only run about 25 or 30 lap races, just because the engines get hot. They're just air cooled. If they were oil cooled, then you could run however many laps you wanted to. But just to keep the engines cooler, they only run 25 to 30 laps typically. But I have been in the car for over an hour for one of these races, just because caution laps don't count.
Right. I did think of my other question real quick. It was, is there like a worst wreck that you remember, um, physically for you? Maybe not necessarily as bad for the car as some others, but is there one that you remember was like the scariest, or was it like that last one that kind of put you, that damaged car that you talked about earlier?
So the hardest wreck I took was probably the first time on the racetrack, when I hit the wall at Carthage, coming off the corner, because it was a really hard hit. I mean, you left concrete inside the wheel. You hit the wall so hard, and it was kind of a scary moment because you've never done this, you've never raced before, never been inside of a race car, and all of a sudden you're hitting this wall, and you realize that when you hit this wall, you're not secure in that car as much as you think you are. You have an aluminum racing seat, it gives like crazy. And I can remember the whole top of the seat moving when I hit that wall. And it's just an extremely helpless feeling at first. So that was a little bit of a wake up call. And that's probably the hardest hit that I've taken. Um, the worst wreck was the one you talked about where the car got destroyed, because some guys got together coming off the corner and I had nowhere to go, and I basically used one of the guys in front of me as a ramp and launched the car up into the air. And at one point, I thought that I was flipping because the car was shaking so violently. I thought that I was starting to tumble, and then it just came down hard um, in turn one and kind of took off because the steering column and everything had been disconnected at that point. Which sounds like a violent wreck. Overall, it wasn't, but it's the same type of wreck that put my dad out of racing. He had one just like it, and his wreck was bad enough that it left the belt marks, so you could actually see the webbing of the belt on his chest the next day, where he had hit, and the next day on me, you couldn't see any of that. So the difference in our cars and the difference in the safety from his time period to mine had changed enough that the cars were a lot safer. But yeah, you could still destroy a car, and you can still put yourself in harm's way.
So take us, the end of your legend career or being sort of a journeyman driver, I guess, for a couple more races. When did you get into iRacing?
So, trying to think time wise, it was probably around the end of my driving career, probably around 2009 or 10, that I first got on iRacing, and I think I was on there for a couple of years, and then that's when things started getting serious with college and getting through my final year. So I had to really focus on what was going on and try to figure out what I was going to do for a career and be working. So after that, I'd gotten off of there for uh, I don't know. I'd gotten off of there for a while, so it was, I guess, in 2015, 2015, 2016 is when I decided to get back on iRacing. I've been on there ever since.
So you correct me if I'm wrong, but you were an engineer, correct?
Yes, mechanical engineer.
So you have a mechanical engineering degree,
I do, from Tennessee Tech University.
and this is a bachelor's, right?
It is.
Okay, so I assume then the last, the couple hard years, you're probably taking like thermo and fluids and all that hard stuff like differential
Oh yes,
equations.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah, bad times.
Yeah, we all been there.
It's a lot of sleepless nights. I know that. And during finals week, there was no sleeping. I think there was one finals week I got 2 or 3 hours of sleep the entire week, and like the 2 days after finals were over, I crashed. Nobody saw me.
But I assume a couple C minuses or just bad grades where you're like, you know what, I passed the glass and I have my life, so I'll move on.
There were a few of those.
So
Quick side note: Ryan Seneker's hosting us with one viewer, so appreciate Ryan for being in the chat with us.
so you're on iRacing. When did you start to get into leagues? What drove you to join the leagues? And when did you find BRL?
Yep. So it was kind of by mistake. I was got back into iRacing for the second time, and I've probably been on there about 6 months. And I'm doing the official races and things like that. But as you're progressing, getting your license built up a little bit higher, you kind of realize that doing the official races are okay, but you'd kind of like to have a league of consistent drivers that you're around, so you could better learn the tracks and better learn to race. Because one of the things with the open races is that you never know who you're around, and you never know how you're going to be raced for sure. So it's more of a defensive type racing instead of trying to learn the track or drive the track the best that you can. So I decided that it probably wouldn't hurt to find a league, and I just started looking through the forums and the list of leagues that were there. And at first I wanted to start with something small like legend cars, and I think the first league that I found was the Bootleg Racing League, and at the time they were racing I think on Tuesday nights, and I thought that'd be good to get into that, and I saw that they had some other leagues that they did as well. And I thought, I'll try legend cars with them. If I like it, I'll try to run some of the other stuff with them.
Okay, I was gonna ask that too if BRL was the first iRacing league you joined, so I think you already answered that one.
Yeah, it was, and again, it was just kind of by chance or mistake that I found them.
So you're in the Bootleg Racing League now. You're, you know, running Legends, some other stuff. Do you remember what your first BRL win was? Like which car or track it was in?
I'm thinking that my first win was in the SKs. So back then, the SK was a little bit of a different monster. It was a lot more of a momentum car than what it is now, and you could really drive it hard, and you didn't have to really worry about wearing things out. So I know that first year that I ran legend cars, Lowell felt comfortable enough with me being there that he started moving me up pretty quickly, and he just came to me one night and said, "Hey, do you want to run the SKs? It's a broadcast race." And I had been watching them, and I thought, that's extremely cool to be able to race with these guys on a broadcast. So I decided I would try it, even though I had no experience in those SKs. And I just started turning a lot of laps, getting practice in, and they had the invert where they inverted 8 or 10 cars every week, and I finished like seventh, or I think I finished seventh during one of the races, so I was going to be starting second the next week. And I think it was at Langley that I was able to get a good enough start on the outside and get the lead. And that's a track that's tough to pass on. So as long as you're running a decent line and you're not slow, even if a guy's a little bit faster behind you, he's going to have a hard time getting by. And I was able to hang on and get the win there.
When did your first championship come about in BRL?
So I think the first season that I ran, and I tell everybody, and everybody thinks that I'm lying, but I'm not. When I first joined BRL, I was not the fast guy at all. But I paid attention enough and learned that the guys that were fast were not always consistent. So I learned pretty early on that you didn't have to be the guy that was winning all the races or finishing in the top three every week. You just had to be consistently toward the front and not make mistakes. So that's what I started doing. And the Legend Series that year, I think I finished second to Donnie by 1 point. And then I think we had street stocks and late models, and I narrowly missed out on both of those. So I was kind of feeling dejected, but like, hey, that's not bad for my first year. I'll come back. And there was one championship left, which was the SK, and I was racing Donnie for it. And it came down to a tiebreaker. So the first championship I won was in the SKs that first season. And I actually tied Donnie for the championship, and they went back to wins. And I think we tied on wins, so it had to go down to top fives, and I think I had like an extra top five than what Donnie had, so they ended up giving me the championship.
So Donnie was the one person. He was basically the JR before you were the JR. What were the other fast people at the time that you looked up to?
There was a lot of guys that were extremely fast. You had Brian Neff back then that he was a little bit hard nosed, but he was always fast and always found a way to get to the front. You had Philip Temples that was always up front. Um, the Shanoskis were guys that I learned from. Matt and Tim both. They were always fast, and that's one thing that I encourage anybody that gets into league racing or even into BRL. Just watch some of the guys that are toward the front and see the things that they do. It's not always that they're driving faster; they can be driving smarter than what you're currently doing. So I just started watching these guys, and hopefully Donnie doesn't get upset by this because I mean it as an extreme compliment. But when I first got into BRL, I noticed that Donnie was always one of the guys that was either winning or in the top three in every single race. But during practice, he was slow. And I was like, how's this guy not putting a fast time up during practice, but he's finishing up front? And I paid attention and learned that um, Donnie understood what it took to race, not to be fast, but to race well. And he would run a lap time that he felt was going to be race speed, and he would just be able to duplicate that over and over without making a mistake. And that's what really woke me up. That hey, you don't have to put that fast time up on the timesheet. It's about being consistent and not making mistakes.
Yeah, I think the whole league racing thing is really it's an opportunity for everybody to learn when you're able to race against the same crop of drivers um, over and over again. Not only are you learning about how to beat your competitors every week, but just learning the cars you're running and learning the tracks and um, it's the most similar thing to real racing you're going to get to is running those leagues when you know, you're the traveling circus and you get to actually run a season and be used to the people you're running with, at least generally.
Yeah, there's also sort of like an aspect where because you know everyone, you can kind of become friends with them. And like I know the three of us talk in the Western PA Discord sometimes, but I'm also, we're Facebook friends with some of the other people in the league. And the only thing missing is like I can't, like we can't go have a beer after the race, or if somebody makes me mad, I can't go like whoop their ass after the race because it's like through the internet.
Yeah, it is crazy how the how iRacing has really stretched our borders as far as the people that we are friends with and can interact with. It's given me the opportunity to meet a bunch of really cool people, you two included, that I never would have even known existed without running iRacing. And I mean, really, it also goes back to the Bootleg Racing League specifically. That's what brought us all together to begin with.
Yeah, and you know, without the bootleg racing league, there's a lot of lot of different things that I would never have been involved with on iRacing or in general. And one of the biggest thing is I always wanted to do some road racing and especially the endurance stuff. And without BRL, I would have never had the guys at Western PA invite me to come over and race with them. So a lot of things have worked out because of it. And I'm pretty appreciative because of that.
Yeah, and that's another thing all three of us can say. We're all three Western PI racing drivers, and we were all kind of recruited because of our connections in BRO. We're consistently running, we're consistently clean, and then we kind of become friends with like the Shinoskis and the Wolfsons, and they've kind of took us in as road drivers. And I'd like to ask you about that, Jr. What kind of sparked your interest on the road racing side, and wanting to even do something like that?
I got interested in it because it's a different discipline. It's something different. Driving race cars, there's always going to be similarities and how you go about doing that. But the road racing aspect is, there's a lot more to it. I feel than oval. On oval, you kind of get into a groove and you understand how to get in on your corner entries and the car to rotate and what you need to do. But on the road racing side, it's you've got the left and the right hand turns that they're not the same every time, so it's a little bit hard to explain. But on an oval, you only have two sides of the racetrack. There's only two different types of turns that you might encounter. On the road racing side, it's different at each turn, so you're having to be disciplined on yourself and your driving on how you're approaching each of those corners to get the best result out of it. And to me, I feel like it's more of a thinking game. It's one of those things where you're having to be strategic about how you place your car and where you decide to get on the brakes and just all the aspects of that. Um, that's really what turned me on to it because I was like, there's a lot more that goes into that, and if you can be good at something like that, then you've really got a lot of tools in your toolbox that you can use.
I think for me specifically, the spark of it all actually was just to because I knew iRacing had all these cool cars and tracks, and if I'm only running oval, I'm only using, well, at this point with the dirt in there too, I'm only really using a quarter of what's to offer. So initially, I wanted to get into some road racing because I just wanted to use more of the service, and feel like I'm getting my money's worth. But then once I started, you kind of like it's almost addictive. It's certainly rewarding to take a car and a track and like memorize it and to get that formula down of how to do a lap at a track and kind of be able to get into a rhythm like you would at an oval once you're able to actually memorize the whole track. And I think that's really satisfying to me to be able to nail that down and then be able to go faster and faster.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And the coolest thing about iRacing is how how realistic the tracks are to real life because of the laser scanning and everything that they do with the modeling. And you get an opportunity to race at places that you'd never even get a chance to walk foot on, let alone drive a car on. So there's just a lot of very cool places. You go to Le Mans, the Nordschleife. That's one of those tracks you talk about having to memorize and try to figure out and get into a rhythm. It's an extremely extremely cool track, and in real life, I'll never even get to walk over there on that track or near that track. So to be able to do it on iRacing and experience what that would be like is extremely cool for myself. So that's another aspect that turned me onto the roadside.
I know for me, I got iRacing because I watched Jimmy Broadbent do all the endurance races, and I thought that was really cool. So I got iRacing to pretty much do road stuff exclusively. And then my dad, knowing I'm a huge NASCAR fan, goes, "Why aren't you doing all this oval stuff if you like that so much? And you have the video games for NASCAR, so why don't you run that?" So I started running that, and one thing I never thought I would get into was dirt until BRL and Lowell and John started, getting us back into the dirt stuff. And one thing I found really interesting was, um, JR, was you were getting interviewed by the people at GSRC, and they were curious, what you were doing or what you were trying to find out. And you mentioned that you were just trying to get more tools for your toolbox of dirt racing. Um, Tell us some about that too.
Yeah, the technique for dirt racing I've always found intriguing, I guess. When you watch the guys that are extremely good at it do it in real life, you have the slide jobs, you have the different lanes of racing, and it's amazing to me because on the asphalt side, when somebody goes and tries to pass you, if you feel like you're still in a preferred lane, you continue to race them hard on the outside of them. On dirt, you don't necessarily do that. So if a guy gets the inside of you, even if you know that you got the preferred groove coming up, he's going to try to slide job you or move up. So you back out of the throttle and you try to cross the guy over. So there's that aspect and that mindset of racing that I've always found intriguing, and I've used some of that on the asphalt side to go, hey, I don't have to do it the way that I've always done. There are other ways, and it's it's just something that I kind of fell into, and I've enjoyed doing it. The one thing that I really love about the dirt racing is that there's almost always multiple grooves of racing. So if you're good enough and you know what you're doing, you can always find a groove that everybody else is not running and make some lap time. And that's what I love about the dirt. And I've tried to apply some of that to the asphalt side. I don't know that the tracks are 100% there where you can do it each and every week, but you can run your car differently in a non-preferred groove and still make some time. And like I said, a lot of that's come from the dirt side, learning how they do stuff there.
Yeah, it's definitely been a new challenge, and we're all thankful that iRacing's given us the opportunity to race on dirt and do all these different disciplines. I mean, it's pretty unlimited as to the possibilities of how you want to challenge yourself, and it's kind of cool too because these different disciplines kind of mold you as a race car driver virtually, obviously. However, you choose. You're not now you're not limited necessarily to the oh well this is financially this is what I can afford, so this is what I'm going to race. Now as long as you can afford the content and the hardware and stuff, um, you can choose to go any which way you'd like in your quote unquote career. I'd actually like to preview real quick the upcoming Bootleg Racing League season, because now we're going to the tour mods instead of SK mods. Um, Me personally, I'm super excited for the tour mods. I've run some leagues with them. They're really fun. How do you feel about those, JR?
I haven't ran a lot in them to know for sure how we're all going to be able to race around each other. But I enjoy driving the car itself. I like that you have a lot of throttle response and you have to drive the car with a little bit, especially from the center of the corner off. So I think that it's going to open up more opportunities for passing. I hope, and yeah, just hopefully we're able to put on a good show for that. I hate seeing the SKs go away because of how hard you could drive those things, and they've always been fun in the past. But I'm excited to try something new and see what kind of results we can get out of it.
Yeah, yeah. I am a little bit sad to see the SKs go away too, since they've been with us for so long. But excited for the future with the tours. Another thing I'd like to ask too is on the road racing side, we do all these endurance races with Western PA iRacing every year. Is there a particular one that we do that stands out to you the most, or that you're most excited for?
Uh, I I get kind of excited about all of them. Daytona's always pretty exciting because it's the first one of the year, and it's kind of it feels like a sprint race. Even though it's 24 hours, you're going hard the whole time. So it's kind of an exciting race for sure, and being being fortunate enough that we've won it before is a cool aspect too. So um, yeah, Daytona's probably one of my favorite.
Yeah, I share that with you too because uh, I'm most excited about that because of it being the first of the year. We got kind of this long intermission between Petit Le Mans at the end of the year or whatever endurance race we run at the end of the year to um, Daytona. So it's kind of a cabin fever thing where you want to get out there and race. And I think, a lot of times we get the most participation on the team for Daytona and possibly Le Mans, but definitely Daytona. And we might even have three cars this year, which is exciting. It's always fun to be able to keep tabs on the other cars, whether they're in your split or not. And it's just endurance racing for me has just been such a like a fresh challenge because no other simulator or game or anything I've played has been able to let us do something like that. And it's so difficult sometimes, but it's just so worth it.
Yeah, it's extremely rewarding, for sure, and it's great having teammates that you're comfortable with and you enjoy hanging out with. It makes a huge difference, and I've learned tons of stuff on the roadside that have affected me in the other disciplines that I do on iRacing. So it's been extremely cool, and yeah, Daytona's always been my favorite probably, but I will say that Bathurst is always probably the most rewarding when you're able to finish that race, no matter where you finish.
Yeah, I mean that was a and that's one we also won, the 12 hour we won in 2019. But then like Bathurst 1000, I was thankful that you and I could partner up to do that one last season, and we ran well there too. Um, that is a tough one. I think the most rewarding one to me was doing the 24 hours of Nurburgring last year, um, being how
Uh,
tough that track was and how tough we knew it was going to be on the competitors.
yeah, the Nurburgring, that's definitely up there, and I'll tell you that was a race that I did not feel comfortable at all going into. I spent a lot of time practicing and trying to memorize how to get around that place, and thought that I was really going to struggle, but actually didn't have too bad of a day.
It was helpful being in that Mercedes GT3. I don't know about you, but I think that's one of my favorite cars on the service. That even though it's been around for quite a while now, that car is just so fun and pretty forgiving to drive.
Yeah, it is, and I love the way it sounds. It just sounds
Yes.
like a race car is supposed to sound.
Leads me into my next question. Do you have like a favorite? I suppose we can ask about road and oval. Do you have a favorite road and oval car on the service?
The road car. Like I said, the the Mercedes GT3 is probably one of my favorite, just because of the way it sounds and the way it drives. Just seems to be enjoyable. I do like the prototypes on the roadside, um, because a lot of people think those are cars that you can just drive into the corner super hard, and slam on the brakes late, but they're not. They do require some finesse to get around the track, and I enjoy that type of aspect of driving. So They're enjoyable too. I'm still trying to get used to the new prototype and uh, and get my driving style fitted it a little bit better. But as far as the oval side, I don't know. I enjoy running the super late models. I don't do enough of that anymore, but I enjoy the super late models for sure, and the way those cars feel. But I really like driving the higher powered stock cars, the ABC classes or the ARCA cars on some of the short tracks. That's requires a lot of throttle control and just it's been enjoyable.
Yeah, and switching from the tracks, do you like? Is there any particular, or switching from the cars? Is there any particular road and oval track that you have a favorite of?
Probably some of my favorite oval tracks. Probably the bigger tracks would be like Atlanta, just because of the wear there and how you have to drive the car to keep it underneath you. I really enjoy something that's challenging, and then you go to the short track type stuff. Probably something like North Wilkesboro, tracks like that. They're a lot of fun for me, especially with the higher powered cars. And on the roadside, I Daytona still comes back as one of my favorites, just because of how you go around the track so hard, and you just keep your speed going. But on the other aspect, Le Mans is probably a close second, because it's a pretty technical track. You got long straightaways, a lot of time that you're on the throttle, but there's some sharp corners and different apexes and things, and you got to watch how you take those to get the most speed out of the car. So I'd say it's probably one of the more enjoyable tracks for me.
Yeah, Daytona is kind of easier in the way you go around the track. I think the most finesse is probably turn one. The bus stop chicane on the backstretch is pretty challenging, but I think for me, at least and most people, it's probably only turn one. But at Le Mans, there's so many, pretty much every corner on the track is difficult to get into and out of just right, because if you don't, you're most likely going to end up in the fence.
The I don't want to call it easiness, but the simplicity of Daytona, though, is one reason why I like it, is because you just attack that track more than, at least to me, more than any other really uh, road track or road course. Um, it's just an offense track all the time.
Yeah, the only track I can think of close to that same kind of offense from my standpoint is maybe Watkins Glen, especially the Cup layout. But even when you have the boot, it's still pretty hard racing the whole time.
Yeah, I agree. It seems to be like the higher speed, like higher average speed tracks, where you don't really have that many hard braking turns, where you kind of get that sensation.
JR, what are some things you're looking forward to for the next season in BRL, whether it's on the dirt side or the asphalt side? I know we have the new truck series.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing with the dirt street stocks and um, just trying to figure out how to drive those a little bit better. It's I've learned a lot, through the seasons of running. I just gotta figure out how to get my consistency a little bit better on the long runs. So looking forward to that. And then, like you said, the truck series is a returning series this year. I haven't ran that since 2017 on BRL, so it's cool having it. Um, they're the higher powered vehicles, but because they're the trucks, they're got that higher center of gravity feeling, and the way the car rolls through the corner is a little bit different. So it's a little bit different of an animal, and will be a little challenging on these short tracks. So look forward to getting into that. And of course, like we said earlier, we got the tour modifieds coming this year. So there's a lot of new things that will be challenging this year, and everybody's going to have to get used to and learn them and adapt to them.
Definitely shaping up to be another exciting season of BRL, that's for sure.
Yeah, one thing that has been great about Bootleg Racing League is its longevity. Um, being, being around as long as it's been and being consistent. It's had its changes, but it's always putting out some kind of something to run. 4 seasons a year, every single year, um, which has been another great thing for me, at least. Being as a driver, you kind of know what you're getting into with BRL. The only thing that really is changing is some format changes and some cars and tracks and things, but it's been cool to be a part of that community, I guess you can call it, for multiple years now. Yes, I actually sparked just a question just now. Jerry, you ever have any experience with any other like racing games or simulators?
Yeah. I've got a PlayStation 4. I'll not as much as I used to, but I'll play some different games and things on there. F1. I've even played the the NASCAR Heat games, which are not anywhere near simulator type material at all. But they're they're not that bad to pass the time and have some fun with once in a while. But yeah, I enjoy doing like the Formula One games and project cars, stuff like that. That's been enjoyable in the past.
If you're ever looking for more dirt experience, I highly recommend either Dirt 4 or Dirt Rally 2.0.
I have played some of the dirt games, but it's been a while. I haven't played any of the newer ones.
We do talk a little bit about general gaming on this show. You said you were into like some of the story type video games.
Yeah, and you know, I- again, it's been a while since I've played a lot of them, but I'm into games kind of like the Last of Us, Resident Evil type games, Call of Duty, things like that.
Oh, here's one question or a couple questions that we've asked just about all of our guests on here. Do you have a bucket list race event that you would want to go to as a fan? In real life, obviously.
Yeah, probably for me because of the oval racing background. I've always wanted to go to the Daytona 500 one year. I've never been to Daytona at all for a race, but to see the Daytona 500 would be pretty cool, I think.
And then another question I've has been recurring is if you had the chance to be a pro driver in any discipline in real life, you could choose any one to be competitive at. Uh, what would you choose? Would it be in the NASCAR ranks or something else?
Yeah, I've always had a soft spot for the NASCAR stuff. I know a lot of people don't agree, but I've always loved the NASCAR side of things. I've always wanted to drive one of the trucks in real life. I think that'd be extremely fun because of the type of tracks that they run. They run super speedways. The mile and a half ovals. They also run short tracks. They even have some dirt racing that they've done for the past couple of years. So along with the road course stuff. So it's very diverse. That kind of racing in real life would really attract me. I think not just having the same thing that you go to every year or every week. Going to short tracks or big tracks every week. You got a diverse group of tracks that you're running on, and yeah, I think that'd be really cool to do.
Awesome. I think I had one more question in my mind and it just slipped. Do you have any other questions, Austin?
No, I'm all out of questions.
Well, we were able to get an hour and a half of content, so I appreciate JR for being our guest this week. We had kind of a holiday special this week with just chatting with one of our iRacing friends. So I appreciate you, JR, for coming on board. I'm sure we'll have you on here again. We can catch back up on what we've been up to. But yeah, I'm excited to be racing against you next week, along with you, Austin. We'll be back at it with Bootleg Racing League, and then in what, few more weeks or whatever, we'll be heading to the 24 Hours of Daytona on iRacing. So uh, thank you, JR, for hanging out with us this morning, and we'll definitely see you soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. It's been a lot of fun hanging out this morning. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for being here, JR.
All right. Thanks everybody that tuned in to watch. I will post this video later to YouTube. I'll also put that link to in the description to the one of the racetracks that JR mentioned earlier. But anyways, guys, we'll be back next week on a normal schedule, and good luck and Godspeed to all of you.